Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin dominance and how the final rotation is likely going to begin very soon. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So right now, Bitcoin dominance is still sitting at around 58%. And one of the things that we mentioned would likely happen in the month of September is that Bitcoin dominance would likely carve out a low, right? And while everyone wants it to just be a simple move down and then right back up, it tends to take the better part of a month. You can see that the same thing happened right here in September of 2020, and the same thing happened over here in September of 2017. I think that the final rotation back into Bitcoin for this market cycle is about to start. I think the low is likely already in, right? So I think there's a good this is a good candidate low for Bitcoin dominance here at around 57.17%. If you guys remember from a few months ago, one of the things that we talked about was that dominance could easily just go back down and tag this trend line. And it did, right? It tagged the trend line. It even had a wick below it. But ultimately, I think we're going to see dominance head back up. We have to remember that Bitcoin dominance, the best month for Bitcoin dominance on average by far is October. If you look at the ROI from the cycle bottom for Bitcoin, you can see we're getting into the final innings of this bull market. If you look at it from peak to peak, you could also argue that we're also getting into those final innings. And if you measure it from the halving, we are arguably getting into the final innings of the bull market. In that case, what normally happens is the very last move, Bitcoin dominance should surge one more time. Okay? Same thing happened in 2017. Same thing happened in 2020, 2021, where you see Bitcoin dominance drop, right? So you see it dropping, just like we've seen it dropping over here. But then we get that final spike by dominance back up to the upside in Q4 before alts then start to outperform Bitcoin. So I think that Bitcoin dominance is about to shoot up a lot. Now, there's a lot of people that think that alt season is around the corner and they're calling for Bitcoin dominance to crash. But this is not the time for Bitcoin dominance to usually crash. If you go look at monthly returns for Bitcoin dominance, right? It's a little bit hand wavy, but if you go look at monthly returns for Bitcoin dominance, what you'll notice is that October by far is the best month on average. Now, to within one standard deviation, right, there's a wide range. So there's no guarantee that dominance goes up in October, but I think it has to be the most likely outcome. On average, dominance goes up about 4.8%, plus or minus 5.8% to the one standard deviation. So you're looking at dominance potentially going up as, getting a 10% rally from the current levels, and that would be essentially within one standard deviation of what we normally see in the month of October. If you look at this, you go up 10%, that basically puts Bitcoin dominance back near the highs. If it's only a 3 to 4% move from the current levels, then you're basically looking back at the 20-week SMA. But regardless, dominance should absolutely explode higher as we get, I've for a long time I've said as we get into late September. We're in late September, right? And we're seeing Bitcoin dominance go up. But in October is when it should absolutely explode higher. Remember, September is the month where we often find lows for Bitcoin dominance. Sometimes we'll find highs, but whatever direction dominance is going into September and then reverses course out of it. So like in 2019, dominance went up into September and then it started to go down after it. But if dominance is going down into September, then it tends to reverse course out of it, if that makes sense. Even in 2018, you can see that dominance here has found a low in the month of September. If you look at 2022, you'll see a low in the month of September. If you look at 2023, you'll also see a low around that time, and so on and so on and so on. And in 2020, right, a low in September. So I think this is going to play out the exact same way. Okay, dominance should absolutely explode higher. in October. Now, in the month of September, Bitcoin dominance has been holding the lows, holding the bull market support band, actually just like it did over here in 2020, just like it did in 2020. And we still have a couple more days, of September. So I'm not suggesting that, it's going to play out the exact same way, because the rally over there started in the first week of October. So, if there is a little bit more consolidation, I wouldn't get too scared by it. Unless we get weekly closes below the 50-week, which we're not getting right now. And if we do, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But that's not what we're looking at right now. We're looking at Bitcoin still holding above its bull market support band. It's possible that you get another wick down. But all in all, I think liquidity will flow back to the king. And again, you have 3 different outcomes, and every single outcome should likely lead to Bitcoin dominance going higher. If Bitcoin does not hold the 20-week SMA as support, and if it wicks down here, we've seen over the last few days, whenever dominance was dropping, we saw Bitcoin dominant, or when Bitcoin was dropping, we saw Bitcoin dominance start to spike. So if it fails to hold, which hopefully it doesn't, dominance should go up. If it continues to ride this level, we should also see dominance go up, because we're too close to the bull market support band for altcoins to get too courageous. And if Bitcoin starts to go back up, like after 2020 and like after 2017, checking with this 21-week EMA, and like 2021, then we know dominance should go up as well into the final market cycle top. So it seems like no matter what happens here, Bitcoin dominance should spike, right? It should spike. And I think we will see it heading back up to 60% really, really soon. That's not to say that altcoins have to crash or anything like that. It's just that they're going to lag, right? And even Ethereum, if you go back to 2020, and you guys, I know I've been pretty bullish on Ethereum for the most part. I was just calling for a correction back to the 21-week EMA before we commence with another move to all-time highs. If you look at 2020, you can see that Ethereum really, it held the 21-week EMA, but it did not take out the August high until mid-November. Right, until mid-November, whereas Bitcoin took out the August high in mid-October. So it took a whole extra month. So what I'm saying is that over the next month, you're probably better off with Bitcoin in most cases. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to go sell your Ethereum for Bitcoin or anything like that. I'm not trying to say you need to do that. What I am saying is that it would be prudent to basically assume that liquidity will flow back to Bitcoin in September, or in late September, and really throughout the whole month of October. So I would remain bullish on Bitcoin dominance for at least the next 5 weeks, and then we'll talk about potential changes and how things might play out. But that is ultimately what I think is going to happen. The other thing you have to remember is that social interest in crypto still remains relatively low, right? Like if you look at the social risk, it still is really low right now. And with it being low, there's just not enough new retail participants to really justify a true alt season. And so when liquidity shifts back to the king and social interest is low, it's just a great recipe for Bitcoin dominance to explode higher. So again, I'm not calling for Ethereum to crash or anything like that. I think it likely will stay above the bull market support band, right? I think it'll stay above that level, and if it wicks down, it should hold it as support. The problem is that it's just going to take longer for Ethereum to gear back up to potentially head back higher near the highs than it will for Bitcoin. And that's the point, is that if the bull market is to continue, which is what we all hope it does, Bitcoin leads the bull market, and then everything else follows a few weeks later. So liquidity should flow back to the king. Bitcoin dominance should start to go a lot higher. If you look at alt Bitcoin pairs, they're starting to roll over again. Looks a lot like 2023 when you had sort of an initial move and then a fade and then another move and then a larger fade, right? Initial move and a fade, another move, and we're likely going to get a larger fade by alt Bitcoin pairs. If you look at total 2 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, so this includes Ethereum, what you'll notice is that it's tagged this trend line for the 3rd time, and every single time people call for alt season, and it just continues to be rejected. It likely will break through, but not yet, right? Not probably for the rest of this month, not for October, maybe in November, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, liquidity should flow back to the king. So as annoying as it might be for me to just say the same thing over and over and over again. As annoying as it may be, the reality is that Bitcoin is the reason the other cryptocurrencies exist. And I think that the people calling for alt season are once again premature on their call. I think liquidity should flow back to Bitcoin starting now, and we should see Bitcoin dominance back above 60% really, really soon. So do not fade liquidity back to Bitcoin. I think it will be the next narrative. I don't know what people are going to blame for it. I know a lot of people have been saying, well, the altcoin ETFs are coming, therefore, I'm wrong. But to me, all that stuff is noise. This is the time for liquidity to flow back to Bitcoin. So what you should see happen is when Bitcoin goes up, you'll see altcoins go up a little bit less. And then when Bitcoin gets a pullback, altcoins should then pull back even more. And even today is a great example, right? Bitcoin's up almost 2%. Ethereum's only up about 1%, right? If you look at total 3, it's not even up a full percent. So you're already seeing the narrative shift, right? It's already here for those who care to listen, and for those who don't want to just run around screaming it's alt season over and over and over again. Watch for liquidity to flow back to Bitcoin. The alt season calls will likely be wrong again, and then we'll talk here in a few more weeks about dominance and if it's playing out how I think. If we see a low for like if dominance goes to 55 or 56% within the next week or two, then I'm wrong, right? It's important to know like what would need to happen for me to be wrong. If you see dominance below 55, around 55 to 56%, I think it's that would be an argument to say, all right, my view on dominance is wrong this time. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think dominance has formed a low in the month of September, just like we said it would. I think it's going to head higher here at the very end of September, and I think it should explode higher in the month of October. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.